Shalom. So today we're going to look at civilization. What does it mean to be civilized? When did civilization start and who did it start with? Right? So looking at history, one thing we need to understand about it is that the conqueror gets to write the history. Right? So it has a lot to do with the narrative that is behind these things, right? So that will shape how we perceive or how we look at history, right? So let's get some understanding right here. Civilize, to be knowledgeable about the behavioral standard in a culture. That's the key word. So this is how people live with each other, to be civil, like civil law, right? So it's about how people live with each other. Keywords in a culture, right? So it's talking about a community of people. And we gonna get this in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7. It says, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." So what he actually gave Adam there was he gave him a law, he gave him a heritage, he gave him a root, he gave him a culture. So it's a certain way of living that the Adamites, that this man, his family, his tribe, his nation of people, they would live among each other with these civil laws, right? Now, what happens? Let's jump down to verse 17. It says, "But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." So what happens now when you forsake your law, your heritage, your culture, right? And you adapt to another person's idea or laws, right? It says, "For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die," which we will get further into. Now we'll go to Genesis chapter 3 and verse 19. It says, "In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground, for out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." So what it's basically saying is that you were taken out of a lower state, right? And you were set up now to be a kingdom of people. So that once you start to listen to the other kings and not reverence your king or your God, you are going to be back into that low state. The same place where you came from, that's where you're going back to, right? Because now what? You're going to have a king ruling over you, and not just a king, because he's not going to be a king of your own kindred. This is going to be a foreigner, right? And you're going to be in captivity. You're going to be at the base of society. So that's exactly where you're going to go back to once you have a king over you. And even in our thing, the Most High talks about that earthly king. Because what happens? The king owns everything. They take away all the cattle, all the grains, everything, they own it. And that's why we did not have these things, right? Now, we're going to look at the political definition of civilization and why they think that civilization started where they think it started, right? Now, this definition: to leave the behavioral standard of your culture and be ruled by a king. Let's go to First Maccabees chapter 1, and we're going to start at 41. It says, "Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people." What it means to be one people? It means you have to forget your laws, your heritage, your culture, your roots, so you can be one with someone else. and then that person is going to rule over you, right? His religion, his politics, his science, everything, his education system, everything you're going to think of. So you're no longer doing things your way. You're living by foreign laws, right? It says, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. What does this sound like? Conquering. No one is just going to give up their heritage or something that their ancestors held on to or held so close, right? So this is talking about being conquered. You have to now do what? You are a subject to this king, right? Now, as it says here, be ruled by a king, right? Which is going to go back to what happens here in Genesis chapter 3 and 19, meaning you're brought back to a low state, right? Be ruled by a king. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2. It says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. Right? Now, come back to here. With Adam, he got his laws, statutes, commandments, and so forth. Guess what? He did not need to force his laws on other nations. He was just living with his tribe, his people. Right? He did not need to make war with the other people to get them subject unto him. He had his own kingdom. It says, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Because what? Now you are imposing all your political policies, everything on a foreign people. So you cannot be at peace when you are being ruled by. Imagine you have a cat and a dog and you're trying to get them to be one. You cannot train a cat to bark like a dog. So the cat will never be at peace trying to learn something that is foreign to its nature or outside of its nature. And that's the same thing with we. But we try to normalize these things so we don't really feel the effect of it. Right? Now, let's come over here. We're going to go back to Genesis chapter 2 and verse 8 to verify this type of civilization. It says, and the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So we can see that the Adamites were in that region, right? Verse 15 says, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. How do you maintain it? By the law, statutes, and commandments. The judgments is just like any other country. You keep it or you maintain your region by the policies that govern that place. It's the same thing. The difference was that Adam was not pushing his culture on the other people, so everyone would be at peace. Just like when King David and King Solomon was reigning, all the enemies were at peace. Imagine your kingdom be so peaceful that even your enemies are at peace with you. And that's what it was. That's why it says, when the wicked rule, the people mourn. When the righteous rule, they rejoice. Because the Arabs, you don't have to force your way of life on the Arabs. You don't force it on the Africans. You don't force it on the Chinese. No, everyone is at peace living according to their culture. Right? Now, this idea here, being ruled by a king, and this is why people think that civilization started with the Sumerians and the Akkadians, right? Genesis chapter 10 and verse 10, it says, and the beginning of his kingdom, talking about Nimrod, let's go to verse 8. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. This was not a hunter of animals, wild beasts, and so forth. He was a hunter of souls, gathered people to himself, conquering. And it comes back right here, right? It says, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, which is Europe, Calne, Akkad, which we know of the Akkadian Empire, in the land of Shinar. Shinar, Sumer, the same things, right? So the Sumerians were the Kushites. Nimrod came from the lineage of Kush, right? So these people were Kushites. They were in the southern region of what we call Mesopotamia. What is Mesopotamia? Is a Greek word, the land between rivers, two rivers, Mesopotamia. All right, so that was the region right there. Now, as we could see that you have different cities, right? Now, what is an empire? An empire is a geographical location that is ruled by a single king, right? And that person is called an emperor. So think about it. You have Erech, Calne, Akkad, and Sumer, right? 4 different cities, one ruler. His name was called Nimrod. No, this was in the land of Shinar. However, listen what it says here. Going over to verse chapter 11, verse 9. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. So this place was not originally called Babel. In Hebrew, Babal, right? It was in the land of Shinar. It was named after the confusion. This is the Hebrew word for confusion, right? Babal. Later on, it was called Babylonia. This is the Greek word, Babylonia, for this region, right? Now, they have been ruled by a single king, Nimrod. Different cities goes back to here. And this is why they think civilization started here, because Nimrod was teaching them one type of teaching, right? So in order for you to merge cities or tribes, different tribes, what do you have to do? Because usually every city or every tribe have their own god. So you'd have to you'd have to merge the different gods together so that you can merge cities and have one ruler. This is why it says over here that all the people should leave their laws, leave their God, and be one people. So they all joined to Nimrod's policies, religious policies, political policies, his science, everything. Right? So this is where that came from, and they call it civilization according to this type of definition. Be ruled by a king. Right? So it depends on what standpoint you're looking at history from. Otherwise, you would believe that this is where everything started. This was years and years after Adam. Right? This was long after Adam. These things happened. So you are saying that all these years from Adam all the way up until the flood, people were not civilized? Again, history is dependent on who is the narrator of it. Right? They would want us to believe that this was the beginning of civilization. So what were the people before doing thousands of years? We were just not conquering them. We were just keeping ourselves to ourselves. Do not make marriages with them. Do not deal with them. Do not make any form of covenants with them. That's what we were doing. And we had our first kingdom, which was called the kingdom of the Adamites. Shalom.